Hello and welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. It's the first week of December. I'm Moon Gun-young, joined by a wonderful panel of foreign journalists today. Welcome all to the program. Now, since U.S. President Donald Trump came into office, he has repeatedly bashed NATO allies for not spending enough on defense, prompting Germany and others to pony up additional money for their armed forces. Now, Mr. Trump has a new target for his pressure campaign: two of the United States' closest Pacific allies, South Korea and Japan. On this week's edition of Foreign Correspondents, we sit down with our panel of journalists to talk more about Washington's defense cost-sharing demands on its allies across the globe. South Korea is already paying a portion of the cost needed to station U.S. troops on the peninsula under the terms of the Special Measures Agreement. Earlier this year, South Korea's financial contributions for the stationing of U.S. troops here was roughly $880 million for the year of 2019. However, Washington is now demanding a five-fold increase in South Korea's financial commitments in 2020 compared to this year's level. Now, what are your thoughts on this demand by the U.S.? I mean, five-fold increase, that's a lot, right? I mean, for South Korea's hosting or stationing of U.S. troops on the peninsula.
I think really it's a negotiation tactic. It's a strategy to, you ask for five and you settle for two. I mean, I think it's really a tactic to try to make South Korea pays more. I think it's crazy. I mean, I don't understand how you can suddenly, when you keep saying, oh, we have such a trusted relationship, we are ironclad alliance, and like all these nice words they use, and you cannot ask suddenly what is supposed to be your ally, one of your best allies, to carve like 5 times more money. And it makes US looks very bad. I mean, there is one word that I keep listening these days and I keep reading in the press is mercenary. They look like mercenaries, and you can find this in editorials, you can find it when people talk in the street. They're really, I mean, and at my level, I mean, I cannot speak for every South Korean, but the South Korean people I talk to, I can feel a level of anger, and I think this attitude is endangering the alliance. And the last poll I could find says that 83% of South Koreans oppose, of course, this contribution. And even more interesting, 55% of South Koreans are fine with a US troops reduction. And this is really crazy. This is new. I never read such a figure. So this already has some consequences.
I totally agree with what you just stated. I believe this seems to be some kind of the art of the deal sort of strategy. But yeah, it's outrageous when you think of it. If this is the ironclad alliance and this is how you treat your allies, but we've already seen this with what President Trump was trying to do with the FDA. It's not the first time, it won't be the last. It is probably going to affect how other U.S. allies regard the U.S. because President Trump is making them look like mercenaries. You said it.
Well, President Trump recently in Florida rally said that he's the president of the United States and not the president of the world. So, perhaps it's coming from that mindset.
Yeah, so I heard that the estimated cost of maintaining U.S. force in South Korea is around $2 billion. It sounds, demanding, but American officials said that it is fair and equitable because they justify by saying it takes $5 billion if South Korea takes the control of, combined U.S. and Korean force. So that's the explanation of, American side. So when I heard of this, I think that, honestly speaking, I heard that it makes sense, but it is too much.
Right. So
Yeah.
you think the five-fold figure You think that's a reasonable figure?
No, the explanation of U.S. sounds reasonable, but to Moon administration, politically unfeasible.
Right.
Because, the support rate is low, and you have a general election next year. So Moon administration accepted the demand from U.S. 100%. It will give huge damage to this administration.
Right. I mean, also because just in the host country's defense, the host country is lending land for free.
Yeah.
There are also direct and indirect costs affiliated with stationing the military here. So it seems like the U.S. right now is demanding for both direct and indirect costs affiliated with this.
Yeah, my main issue, you say it makes sense, but I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The US is not in Korea only to protect South Korea from North Korea. They're in Korea because they have strategic interests in the region. They want to contain China. I mean, the USFK here, they target China too. So it's so hypocritical of the US to suddenly present the thing this way. And people seem to forget that South Korea is already paying, in many ways, the USFK activities. I'm thinking of THAAD. South Korea did not want THAAD initially. Officially, is to protect South Korea from North Korean threat, but everybody knows that it targets China as well. And Chinese government took very strong retaliatory measures that South Korean economy is still suffering from. South Korean companies cannot sell video games in China since the THAAD was installed. The tourism was hit. K-pop stars cannot do concerts in China. So there is this really, really high cost. Where does this appear in the calculation? Well, I have a very, very strong issue with South Korea is paying in many ways for the USFK, the US military presence here.
Don't get me wrong. So I'm with you. But,
Okay.
So I think but South Korea is very under huge pressure. Yeah, that I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Tetsuo was trying to make the point that South Korean government right now is under huge pressure from all corners of the realm. No, South Korea isn't the only country facing heavy U.S. demands regarding defense cost sharing. Media reports say that Washington has also requested Tokyo to pay a hefty $8 billion to keep American troops in Japan. Now, Sakabe, Tetsuo, how is the Tokyo government reacting to this new request from Washington? Do you believe Japan will agree to this?
So the expert said that Japan has more leverage compared with South Korea. So there are three reasons. One is Japan can share the same goals, which is cementing the free and open Indo-Pacific vision. So, but on the other hand, South Korea there's a doubt that South Korea is leaning toward China. The second reason is Japan has more, cooperative track record at leadership level and also institution level. The also third reason is according to 2004 report by the U.S. Defense Department, Japan that year covered almost 75% of the cost of basing U.S. troops in Japan. So combining these, reasons, so also I can say that Japan has more leverage in order to resist to the pressure of U.S.
Just to make sure, the South Korean government stance is that you mentioned the Indo-Pacific strategy, the U.S.'s Indo-Pacific strategy, but South Korea's stance is that it's a ironclad alliance with the U.S., however, good friends with China. So, compare allies and friends.
U.S. force in Japan is composed of mainly Navy and Air Force. So in case of Korea, it is composed of mainly Army. So in order to react to the adventures of China, so Air Force and Navy is more important than Army. So that's the reason why. So I think Japan has more strategic point from the viewpoint of U.S.
But also from the viewpoint of the U.S., they should also take into account that geopolitically, South Korea is part of the mainland. So having their U.S. troops here on the mainland as their last resort, containing whatever it is that they want to contain from China, North Korea, what may it be, is also a strategic interest.
Right. Also, the worst case scenario is withdrawal of U.S. force from Peninsula. So because we think that imaginary enemy line will shift from 38 parallel to Tsushima Strait between Korea and Japan. So it's a nightmare to Japan. So that's the reason why we really think that alliance between U.S. and Korea is very, very important.
And also there is a trilateral alliance between the three here. President Trump is also pressuring its NATO allies in Europe to boost their spending on defense. During a visit to Europe in October, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper told Washington's NATO allies that they cannot freeload on the U.S. in matters of defense and security.
There can be no free riders to our shared security. Regardless of geographic location, size, or population, all must do their part to help deter war and defend the alliance.
NATO members have pledged to increase their defense spending to 2% of GDP by the year 2024, but as of 2018, only 7 of the 29 NATO member states have reached that threshold. How have countries in Europe responded to Trump's demand to boost their defense commitments?
The European countries are increasing their military expenditure, and quite significantly. The last figure I could find is like there is an estimation the European defense spending will surpass $300 billion by the year 2021. So, according to recent analysis. So, I mean, and you see countries like Germany. Germany was strongly criticized by Trump for not spending enough. They will spend an estimated 11% more defense cash for this year. Sweden, 9% increase. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Even France said that they will try to reach the 2% GDP target in expenditure. Now France is 1.8%.
So do you think that the 2% of GDP defense commitment is reasonable?
No, I don't think.
No, that's the different thing.
I would like 1% to be reasonable and just that doesn't. I mean, making your contribution more balanced within the alliance, of course. But in general, like 2% of GDP just means that we're in arms race again.
Exactly. Why do we need, who is the enemy?
Full throttle.
Why do we need 2% of GDP while our health system is crumbling? We don't pay our teachers enough. Like we need money to make the French society better. Why should we spend 2% in our military? Why, like, who is the enemy? Russia? Russia has the GDP of Italy. Why should we spend so much? I don't like the fact that we are, as you mentioned, militarizing our society again. Why?
Yeah.
The U.S. has a wide-reaching military presence all across the globe with troops stationed not only in South Korea and Japan, but also dozens of countries in Europe, the Middle East, and everywhere else. The U.S. has maintained a large overseas military presence since the end of World War II, mostly due to counterbalance the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So why does the U.S. continue to maintain a large military presence across the globe despite, yes, officially, despite the end of the Cold War?
I have the feeling that we're in a little bit of a colder war, but it's still there. And you can see how the INF treaty actually expired, was not renovated. Was it at the beginning of this summer, or in August, right? The New START treaty is about to expire in 2021, and I don't see that being renewed either. There's both Russia and the United States trying new cruise missile systems. Probably in December, the U.S. will test a new ballistic missile, apparently. I mean, there seems to be a new arms race going on. I don't approve of it. But if you're part of the Atlantic Treaty, such as the case of a lot of European countries, well, military presence and the support of the U.S., I guess, is very important in this case.
Yeah, but the question is, why do they keep this military presence abroad? I mean, I think it's because they have this power. It's a way it's a tool of power, of influence. So you have it and you project it. You can do it. And I think there is as well a lot of pressure from within the military. Like since you have these bases, that you have inside pressure to keep them. It's a remnant of the Cold War, but I know China is rising, and I know China is considered as a rising threat. But I still call into question whether it's necessary to have this array of bases around the world.
On the flip side, Tetsuo, do you think that this U.S. military-based presence all across the world, do you think that's been playing up the U.S. as a global policeman? I mean, do you think the U.S. has been doing an adequate job in that?
Yeah, I think the world is more stable and peaceful if U.S. plays a role of world police. Mm-hmm. I know that many American people are fed up with the world police, but the current system is built centered on U.S., for example, UN and IMF and the World Bank. So, but the point is that Trump is, systematically undermining the alliance of Japan and Korea. So what I'm worried about is China is creating another one, creating alternative. For example, one road, one belt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, if you don't want the U.S. to be the global policeman, who do you want the global police to be? China, Russia?
President Trump has said that he doesn't want to play the global police anymore. So.
And I mean, I don't deny the benefit of the Pax Americana, it was called around the world. But this global policeman did mistakes too, and the Iraq war was a huge mistake. It made the whole Middle East unstable for such a long time. So it's not like it's a perfect solution either. And maybe it's time to think of another system with like international organization system where the U.S. is not anymore the...
Maybe this will be the end of history then, as Fukuyama said back in the day.
Now, President Trump has repeatedly raised the issue of defense cost sharing and has long held a dissatisfaction regarding the current level of funding provided by South Korea, Japan, and its other allies across the globe.
They want us to do the fighting. They also have to pay a price. And sometimes that's also a monetary price. So we're not the suckers of the world.
We will fight at all costs, right? But if we're attacked, Japan doesn't have to help us at all. They can watch it on a Sony television, the attack.
Our alliances have taken advantage of us. If you look at how much money we spend on NATO and how much money countries from Europe, who are really a much bigger beneficiary than we are. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on those exercises, and I hated to see it. I thought it was unfair. And frankly, I was sort of the opinion that South Korea should help us with that. We're protecting South Korea. I think they should help us with that.
Do you think there is a reason why Trump is really, rising to the occasion and being so adamant about getting U.S. allies to pay more for the cost of U.S. defense commitments overseas?
I think Trump is the first American president who cannot share with the same value with Europe and Japan and Korea, which is democracy and also human rights and free speech and so on. So Trump bringing transactional viewpoint to the alliance. So that's the reason why Trump, if there is a problem somewhere, so Trump think like that, or it is your problem, it is not my problem. So that mindset is important, very crucial.
Yeah.
But do you think the timing of this comes a little, coincidental with the, perhaps elections coming up?
Exactly. So that was my point. I think you're right, and I think definitely that's his mindset. And even before becoming a politician, that was his mindset. But there is a coming elections this year, and I think that there is definitely, an electoral goal here. He wants to target the military, the family of militaries who vote strongly for him, and it's a way to tell him, like, you are abroad, your troops, you send your sons in Korea, and they are bringing money to the country. I think there is as well this kind of strategy before the election.
A number of politicians in the media in the U.S. have also expressed concerns that the Trump administration's demands on defense cost sharing was damaging to Washington's relationship with its longtime allies across the globe. Do you believe Washington's repeated demands on cost sharing will have an adverse effect on ties with its military allies?
I think it will, and I think it's already pretty damaging. I'm struck by, in Korea, the usually most conservative politicians, the element of society who are really pro-American, pro-US. You can feel that they're getting angry, they're feeling betrayed by this behavior. And they have, I mean, everybody has the right to be angry. Once again, I don't think the U.S. forces in Korea are here for humanitarian reason or just out of they want to help. No, they're here because they have a strategic interest to be here too. And Trump fails to see that, and I think his attitude is actually pretty dangerous.
Right. I would like to stress that South Korea values the alliance with the United States, and the ROK-US alliance remains as strong as ever and should remain that way in the point of view of the South Korean government. The fourth round of talks for the 11th Special Measures Agreement is scheduled to be held sometime in December. Some observers speculate that the U.S. could be trying to make an example out of South Korea with its heavy cost-sharing demands to perhaps gain leverage in Washington's future negotiations, like Tetsuo said, with its allies such as Japan and NATO member states. What is your outlook on defense cost-sharing talks between Seoul and Washington?
And I always feel uncomfortable trying to predict what could happen. The only thing I can say that I think it could be pretty bad, but I think that Trump itself has a strong influence, and the day when he will leave the White House, maybe there will be a chance where it will be an opportunity for South Korea and the U.S. to make up for what has been destroyed during the Trump presidency.
But we have an expiration date of end of this year for the current agreement in place, so the two of us will have to make a deal.
My guess would be that given that there's this timeline and that the end of the year is looming, we've spoken of strategy, we've spoken of the art of the deal, Trump-style negotiation. My take would be that there's definitely going to be an increase. I'm afraid that South Korea is going to pay more money. I mean, we're talking about almost $2 billion on the table in this case.
I agree with Andre. So Korea might be maybe forced to pay sympathy budget like Japan. It will cover up to maybe 70% or 80%, I don't know. Yeah.
That's a whole lot from our current level.
Yeah.
But Tetsuo, what is your forecast of the negotiations between Seoul and Washington, especially coming from Japan, where I'm sure the next counterpart will be Japan in the U.S.'s perspective?
Yes. So it is difficult to predict the result of their negotiation, but it's going to be tough. And also, I would like to say that no matter what kind of sacrifice you pay, so please keep the alliance of U.S. and South Korea.
If we could summarize today's story into a news headline, I'm going to start with
Okay. I like the word ironclad. So my headline would be USFK, the ironclad alliance threatened by Trump's lack of strategic vision.
I would go for a longer headline, something like, despite having a point, President Trump decides to play hardball.
And Tetsuo.
So don't get emotional. Don't get too emotional. Already the alliance between Korea and the U.S. was damaged, unfortunately, because of this GSOMIA issue. So I'm very concerned about the result of the negotiation, but don't get too emotional.
Right, don't get too emotional, and that is where we end. And actually, at one point, I don't know if the U.S.-South Korea alliance has been damaged by the GSOMIA deal. Of course, yes, it's in its rocky patch, but whether it's damaged or not, I'm not sure, because I stand that we have a strong alliance right now, South Korea-U.S. alliance that we value. That brings us to the end of our discussion on defense cost-sharing negotiations between South Korea and the United States. We will be back next week to talk more about the latest issues making headlines, so do not forget to tune in then. Take care. Bye-bye.